Good evening. It is about 6 p.m. on Sunday. What are we at? The 26th, 28th of January. And I am Delaware State Representative Paul Baumbach, serving the 23rd Representative District. And I'm here this evening to discuss our Delaware Governor John Carney's uh, proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year, going from July 1st, 2024 to June 30th of 2025. Since I'm sort of a numbers nerd, I figured this is something that might be useful for me to present to you, and you can see whether or not it's at all interesting. So let's go with that, and I will jump over to, here we go. Okay, so the governor on Thursday at 1 p.m. presented his budget. Here is the slideshow that he presented, and we'll just go through it pretty briefly, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into some other related stuff. So again, it's for next fiscal year, and the process, we'll see that in the last slide, is that the governor makes a recommended budget on every item in state government, and then hands it off to the state legislature. We have what's known as a joint finance committee that looks at the operating budget part of things. And then we also have a bond bill committee, also known as capital infrastructure, and they'll look at the roads and bridges and schools and government buildings, so the bricks and mortar part of the state. And there's an allocation for that. We'll see that some more. So it hands it off to the legislature in late January. And then at that point, the legislature has a lot of hearings, public hearings, to look it over, make some adjustments. And between now and June 30th, they finalize the budget. And that also includes, as we pass legislation that has a fiscal cost, a measured cost for next fiscal year and beyond that. If it has a big cost of more than $100,000 in a year, it will go to a committee that will review the budget and see, is there room in the budget for that? And if they vote to approve that, it goes into the budget, and the budget's adjusted for that. And if there's not room, then they'll just leave it not appropriated, and therefore the legislation will not move forward. So that's the process over the next 5 months. So let's move forward. So one of the things the governor began with is really focusing on how in Delaware we do, I'm going to say, a fairly admirable job of being very responsible financially. We're one of only a handful of states that not only is AAA rated by the bond rating agencies, but also has remained so for many years, including across the 2008-2009 financial meltdown. And that doesn't happen by chance. Delaware has taken very seriously the responsibility of managing its budget, and we've got three different mechanisms to that. We have what's known as benchmark spending. And actually, I want to go to the next slide, and we'll go back and forth between this slide and the next one. So the yellow shows you how our revenue, our income for the state government goes up and down year by year, but we don't spend it at the same volatile way that it comes in. Because I mean, let's say, for instance, that we spent all of this that came in fiscal 2022. Well, that may be great, but all those programs that we added so that we were spending all that money, when the next year we had much less money, we'd have to be cutting all the stuff that people had perhaps started depending on. So instead, we have a smoothed process. So if we go back, the benchmark spending, we do a measure and say, this is based on a formula, this is how much we want to spend, and it's based on the growth of government, it's based on the growth of inflation, based on the growth of the revenues. Then anytime we've got some income more than normal, you saw that one spike in fiscal 22, we set some aside. So I use the squirrel and the oak tree story. If we have a great year in the summer, sunny days, we'll take those acorns and we'll set them aside. And then when we have cold, dark days in the winter, we can go into those, the acorn and squirrel analogy. We set those acorns aside in the good days so that we can consume them in the bad days. That's what the budget stabilization fund does. And then the third element, and this is something that's, I'm going to say, lost on some of my colleagues, is that we will not use one-time revenues for ongoing expenses, but we will say, oh, let's again come in here. We have this big spike in fiscal 22, so we're going to take some of that. We're going to set it aside in that oak tree for an upcoming bad year, maybe 2025, maybe beyond. But we will spend a portion of this, but not for the operating budget, not for ongoing programs, but rather for one-time programs. One example is we have a lot of state buildings that have not had enough maintenance, and we need to put a lot of maintenance dollars in it to get it up to speed. We may also use it for a one-time building of a new building, where again, it's a one-time expenditure. You want to use one-time money for that, not you don't want to have that one-time money go into something that would be ongoing. So using one-time revenues for one-time expenditures is part of how the state stays fiscally responsible. And you can see this blue line is that sort of smooth amount of how much we increase. Now, do keep in mind what the y-axis is. This is not dollars being spent going up and down, but rather it's saying what is the percent increase. So maybe it was around 2 to 3% in fiscal 16, goes up to maybe 4% or so, then down just above 0 in fiscal 18, and up and down. All of these are above 0, so all of these is a growing dollar amount. But relative to inflation, it may not be that much of an increase. You see that 8% growth in fiscal 24. Remember that last year in the summer, we were at inflation of 7, 8, 9%. So it looks high, it is high, but inflation was high at that time. And for that matter, we had a lot of high revenues in the prior year or two that helped us build up our reserves to make sure that we could maintain that. So yes, the rate of increase is down for fiscal 25 in the governor's recommended budget, and that's based on this benchmark and this sort of responsible budgeting that we do here in Delaware. And I'll say that approach is indeed a partnership between the executive branch, the governor's office, and his departments, and also the legislative branch, especially the Joint Finance Committee and the Bond Bill Committee. So here's 5 different elements of things that we do, and this gives you some dollars and percents and such on this upcoming year. So we do have a rainy day fund. It's sort of like an appendix. It has really little function, but we've maintained it, and it's in the Constitution. We've maintained it, and we just make sure it meets what it's supposed to have. We never use it. Literally, we never use it. That's another discussion for another day. So we spend less than 98% of what we bring in. So, if we're earning $1,000 or let's say $100 a week, we aren't going to spend more than $98. And this is because things change during the year. We're going to finalize the budget on June 30th, and it will be active for the next 12 months. Well, a few months in, things may slow down, and we thought we were going to have the full amount for that year, but maybe it comes down a little bit. We want that little buffer, a safety margin. We have a 2% safety margin. So even if it's expected that we're going to have this amount of revenues next year, we're only going to budget 98% of that, to spend 98% of that, to have a little safety margin there. We do have that benchmark. It's that smoothing program, so we don't go up and down. So we don't take all of a sudden a great year of revenues. It may seem like it may be ongoing, but it's just so darn high, it doesn't seem sustainable. So we'll smooth it down a little bit lower. Similarly, if we have a forecast that says this upcoming years, we're not going to get all that much revenues, we aren't going to just jump and cancel programs necessarily, because we have that stabilization fund that we can pull in. So we smooth the budget growth using the benchmark. We maintain the stabilization fund. That's that oak tree, that acorns, that's money. And we're making sure we've got $400 million. That's around 6 or 7% of the annual budget set aside to be used when we have a year where the expected revenue comes down, but we want to be maintaining the programs that our state residents rely upon. And then this year we've got over a quarter billion dollars, $257.5 million for the Bond and Capital Improvements Act. So that's for the schools and the roads and the bridges, and state buildings, et cetera. So that's a big amount. I think it is smaller than last year's, but it is a pretty darn big amount. And that's because we've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to be maintained here. So those are some keys there. So the total budget's about $6 billion. Grant and aid, this goes to nonprofits in our state, about 66 million. I want to point out that the operating budget growth is about 8.25%, and that again is a function of that calculation: inflation, growth in revenues, growth in costs, and still staying within the dollars that are available. And then we've got almost $1 billion that goes to our infrastructure, the Bond Capital Improvements Act, and we do some borrowing, 600 million, 300 from general obligation bonds, and we've got cash and other. And then we've got transportation, 329 million into things like roads and bridges and such. And then we have this one-time supplemental. Remember I said that we try not to take one-time money and use it for ongoing things. So even after we replenish we properly fund that reserve account, that budget stabilization fund, even after we do an operating budget growth of 8.25%, we've set money aside for grant and aid for our infrastructure. Still have some money left over, but it's one time. So we direct that to one-time projects, and we'll dig into that a little bit, about 91, $92 million. And again, we're maintaining that 410 million in the stabilization fund. And by the way, sorry, oh, good. Do you have a question, Sherry? I will get, that's a lot of dough. Yeah, I think $6 billion qualifies as a lot of dough. But that's not at all uncommon for a state, especially a state with almost 1 million people. And if you go to any of our neighbors, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all of them have much larger budgets than our 6 billion. But yeah, I would agree. I think to me, $6 billion is a lot of money. Four areas the governor pointed to is our economy, our schools, families and workforce, and also our environment. And all of those cost money to really focus on. So we'll look at a few details in those four different areas. And this is still high level overall, we've had a real challenge in recent, say, 3 or 4 years of maintaining our workforce and filling our jobs. So we want to make sure that we have competitive salaries for our employees so that we don't lose them to other employers and leave us with too few police officers, too few teachers, too few people working in our state service centers, et cetera. So that's a real focus. It coincides with the increase in the minimum wage. We've been on a multi-year STEP program to get the minimum wage up in our state. And that translates up the salary scale also. We need to make sure that those state workers who are paid more than the minimum wage are getting their wages going up so that we can retain those good employees. We've done a study. There's been a specific committee. You can see it's the Public Education Compensation Committee. And we want to make sure that we can keep hiring good new teachers, because otherwise we're going to lose them to our neighboring states. So our goal is to get towards a $60,000 starting salary for our new teachers over the next few years. And the best way to do that is do it in stages. So we're making some progress here. One of the things we find is that early childhood education, childcare is really important on at least two levels. One is it better prepares our very young residents to be more successful in school when they get there, in kindergarten, first grade. And to get a little more quality attention in their preschool years. The second thing is that when families have affordable child care, then they're able to work jobs, and that helps our economy, and it helps our employers, including the state, and our private employers, making sure that we've got more workers. As I said, we need to make sure our workforce is strong. So one way we do that is by putting some extra dollars into early childhood education and childcare. Opportunity funding is dollars for low-income students and English language learners in our schools. And this adds $10 million to that. That's part of a multi-year. Again, you have to get a lot of dollars in, do it in stages. This adds to the stages of that. Economic development is helping the companies in the state expand, hire more, do more, help our overall economy. Part of that is by adding to our roads and bridges, making sure that companies, employees can get to work to and from, that suppliers can get materials to our companies and get finished products out to where they're sold. And we also need to make sure our communities are safe, and that takes dollars. We also have environmental issues. Addressing climate change comes with a cost to make sure that our environment stays clean. and it comes at a cost to slow down the rate of climate change. Clean water is so important, recreation, but also for our economy. And then there's a lot of new environmental initiatives. And then healthcare costs, and it's not just for you and me. The state itself is, keep in mind, we've got a $6 billion budget. $200 million alone is just for the rising cost of healthcare for our state employees. So that's a bunch. I'm sorry, not just our state employees, also our state residents who use state health insurance. I will get to the question. I want to go through here first. Thank you for writing them. Still put the questions in. I will try to get to all of them before I finish today. So next slide. So public education alone in a $6 billion budget is over $2 billion. So, a third of it, more than a third of it is in public education. And just the increase of 10 million for opportunity funding, again, that for low-income schools with low-income students and English language learners, doing 45 million, again, getting towards the point where our starting educators are getting 60,000 annually, and then the more veteran ones with years of experience get more above that. So we're adding 45 million just for that and salary increases. And student unit growth is just, we have more students in our schools, or we have the same number of students, but they have greater needs. So maybe we have a higher proportion of students who are on, who have autism, those who have maybe developmental disabilities and require more attention, a lower staff to student ratio, higher student to staff ratio. And so the student unit growth, and that's a formula. It's, we take the entire student population and we classify them in different levels of needs, and it comes out with how many units our schools have, and then we pay so many dollars to each school system based on how many units they have. That formula alone is $56 million increase year on year. So that's a bundle. So that goes into what we're doing for public education. Early childhood education, I talked about that a little bit, and I like this at the bottom. It shows over 8 years how we've increased. You can see on the early childhood assistance program on the right, we've more than doubled it. And then you can see for purchase of care, we've almost tripled it. What is purchase of care? For preschool programs, purchase of care is a program where families with a lower amount of income will get some dollars from the state to pay for the child care for their children, so that the parent or parents can pretty much keep a job because they have someone else looking after their child, caring for their child before they're eligible for public schools, kindergarten and above, during the day. So helping with that helps our child care companies. It helps the employees of those child care companies, and it helps our families maintain quality child care. If you hear the noise, that's my cat going crazy in the background. Don't ask me why. So we've got $135 million for early childhood education. And again, a big increase. And really, I want to point out the strong initiative that the governor introduced last year in the budget, especially for purchase of care, a big increase just recently. And that's, I think, really, really critical, and I appreciate that. So future generations. Okay, so this is what we got here. So this is in the environment. We're doing a whole bunch for electric vehicles, including all the charging stations and other clean energy initiatives. One of the things, so this 129.5 million, this is not just state dollars. This is also bringing in federal dollars. And that's one of the really nice things on environmental spending. A lot of times, we may put 5 million in and get 10 million from the Fed. So there's a lot of leveraging with other revenue sources by investing in improving our environment. So clean water, keeping our shoreline. Delaware is blessed with a wonderful shoreline, and I'll say especially, but not only, especially the Atlantic Ocean. And the resource we have, which is really important for tourism, which is really important economically. We also have people who fish, in the fishing industry. So it really matters the quality of our water. And then also with the inland waterways is also really important for both recreation and economically. And note that we're getting, it's listed here, over $18 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law that President Biden and Congress passed. So we're bringing a lot of dollars in to help Delaware's stay green and clean. And then ag land preservation, open space. I'm on the Open Space Council, $10 million each, $20 million total. And that helps our farmers who have wonderful acreage and they'd like to not have it all turn into a development. It gives them a way to, in some cases, just stay farming on it, but get dollars so they're not tempted to sell it to a developer and they can continue perhaps their family tradition of farming. In open space, again, it can be one where it's an easement where the land can't be developed while the state has the easement, or it can be an outright purchase, as the state did in recent months of an addition to the White Clay Creek State Park, about a $24 million multi-year purchase there. So this $10 million annual into each of those programs helps those programs continue to make their progress. Do note that those programs have been getting funded at $10 million a year whenever we can, sometimes zero. But also keep in mind the cost of real estate has continued to grow, and this has been a flat $10 million a year when it's done. So it is a program desperately in need of getting up to date with the higher costs of real estate. So we do a lot in Delaware for economic development to help the companies in Delaware stay healthy, hire more people, and advance Delaware as an economic hub. So $32 million for various programs, including the strategic fund that gives dollars or grants, or sometimes contingent grants based on companies coming to Delaware or expanding existing locations in Delaware, hiring more people. And then Nimble and Sabre. Do we have this? So Nimble it's a biotech. Frankly, I don't have right here what the definition of each one is. Nimble has location on the UD Star campus. It's I'm going to say biological manufacturing. I think it's the M and the B. And I can't define Sabre. Maybe we're going to find it in a later slide. And I like, since 2017, we've added 32,000 jobs from our economic development efforts. So they do track for each dollar that we put in, how many jobs are we expecting, how many do we get? And in the past 7 years, we've produced 32,000 jobs from this spending. Okay, so state workforce. How do we keep our state workforce? How do we fill those vacant jobs? Putting a lot of dollars to make sure that our wages are competitive, 2% increase across the board. And then we also have a lot of state workers who are covered by collective bargaining agreements. So they're negotiated. There's also step increases. That's codified in the state code. If you're in, maybe the police or maybe a public school teacher with so many years of experience, with so many accreditations or higher education degree, your salary would go up. Those things are stipulated in the code. So all the wage increase, 122 million, is going towards that. There's increases, and again, in the past 7 years, annual salary increased by 31%. That's about a 4% annual increase, and that's necessary because that's what employees are getting outside of the state as an employer. So we need to make sure that we keep our state workforce high quality, and we don't have it have them, that our best workers going to other employers. So we need to make sure we're staying competitive with the competition out there. And we've talked a lot about the salaries of public school teachers. We're looking to make sure we keep our recruitment and our retention effective. So state employee health benefits and also retiree health benefits. So the group health insurance plan, GHIP, will take money in from premiums from the workers and also from the state. The state, if it has an employee who's being paid $50,000 a year, there'll be a certain amount of dollars that is also set aside in addition to the salary into this GHIP. So we take them, and that's like that, and that's for healthcare for that year. So the employee pays a little bit, the employer, in this case the state, pays a good amount. That goes in, and yet we're still almost $94 million short of expenses being greater than how much money is being set aside. So for next year, we've got $94 million is going just for the expected shortfall between what comes in and what goes out for next year's actual spending for healthcare for both state employees and retirees, past state employees. And then additionally, we passed in Senate Bill 175 from Senator Townsend and myself, an increase to the trust fund for retiree health benefits of 1% of, it's a formula, 1% of the budget. We have a $6 billion budget. Quick thing should be it's around 60 million. It turns out the formula comes up with 56 million because it's based on the previous year's budget. So 56 million is going towards that trust fund, and we have in our law now that's mandated. Every year we must do 1% of the budget, and frankly, until it gets funded enough, which is going to take a long time. So that's a lot of dollars is going towards current employees and retired employees for their health benefits. And we're spending $2 billion. Remember, that's the same as public education. A third of the state budget is for healthcare, not just for state employees, but it is a bunch of state employees and retirees, also Medicaid, which are generally not state employees, not retirees, but rather other residents of our state who do not otherwise have health insurance and who have a level of income that is too low to be able to afford on their own health insurance. And rather than have them only be able to go to the ERs and increase the cost for our state incredibly, we have Medicaid, and that gives them a nice base level of health coverage to hopefully prevent a lot of more expensive health costs. And that's increasing. $200 million, we'll say 10% of the amount that goes to healthcare. It's an increase of 10%, actually more than that, 200 million compared to 1.8 billion from last year. Big increase. And this amount, as I say, current state employees and retirees, what they're saying here is around $1 billion, and then Medicaid is another $1 billion, so that goes into the $2 billion in there. So we spend a lot of dollars, as do all states, on healthcare for our residents and also our employees and retirees. This just shows you a whole bunch of different numbers, different categories. I'm not really going to go into it, but this is the fund growth. A lot of it is salaries and healthcare costs, higher education, and some other items in there. So go there. Healthcare spending is just taking up a lot of the budget, and that limits how much we can do for other things. Education, we talk about purchase of care and early childhood assistance program, and the growth we've had, a little bit repeat of a previous one. 10 million for the opportunity, went over that. 20 million going to the Reading Consortium, Wilmington Learning Collaborative. This is working to make sure that the schools in the city of Wilmington come up and catch up to the schools outside of the city of Wilmington. And some of that is mandated by a court order. So we're making sure that we're living up to our obligations to the residents of Wilmington nearby. We know that matters for the entire state. 17 million is going to mental health services, and in our schools, and we know how important it is. It's actually, I'm going to say, scary and sobering to see the proportion of students in our schools who have mental health conditions. Most often, it takes quite a while for them to be identified, and we start to address them. And we are going to introduce $3 million for statewide literacy coaches, again, to help our students. And keep in mind, one important thing is with the pandemic in the past few years, our students have fallen behind a bit because they were not in school 180 days a school year after year. There was like a year and a half where it just was very spotty. So we need to do some catch up. So we need to make sure we have some dollars to pay for that catch up. Higher education, about 10 million each to our 3 state schools, UD, DSU, and Del Tech, and then some other joint programs. And we're finished year 4 of bringing the salaries at Del Tech up to where it needs to go. And we're hoping that's going to reduce turnover. And we're also upping our scholarships by $7-8 million for all 3 of the colleges. Really important for our Delaware residents and for our Delaware schools, Delaware schools of higher learning. So on the environment, 32 million for clean water, 4 million for cover crop investment, lead assessment, 3.5 million, conservation cost share. So we do a lot through the conservation district. I think that's what this relates to. I know that when we have, it could be creeks that are threatening homes, We'll use the conservation district for that. If we have sinkholes or other kind of drainage issues, I think there's a lot of the conservation district really helps us engineer them and get solutions when we've got challenges that are threatening individuals in our state. And I'm not any ag person. There's $2 million for this program called the Agricultural Production Insurance Assistance Program. I assume that's for when there's a weather event, say a drought, and the crop doesn't come in well. We don't want to have forced sales of farms. So we've got help for those farmers in maintaining crop insurance. I'm guessing. Again, not an authority there. So really, we've gone over, oh, here we go. So this is the capital budget, about 170 million for school construction and renovation. We do a match of that. So it's a match of state money and the local district money. And when the local district passes a referendum to accept a higher tax rate in order for doing some school building, the state needs to match the dollars or do a match onto the dollars to be able to pay for the entire school. So that's $170 million next year proposed for school construction itself. 30 million, as I said, 10 million to each of our 3 colleges, state colleges. Deferred maintenance for our school buildings of 18 million. That was something that it was being forced to go through the referendums and often failing because it didn't hit the vote count, and our schools could be crumbling as a result. So the state said, you know what, that's just too important. We need to maintain our existing public school buildings. We're putting 18 million that doesn't need a referendum to help the school buildings most in need of deferred maintenance. And then also dollars for school safety. That's making sure that alarms work, doors, locks, all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of economic support, economic development, and you can see a whole bunch of different programs. We have 7 different programs of 40, 50, 60, $70 million for helping our small businesses and with infrastructure, including getting, for instance, highways and byways in place for where a new facility might be going in. Strong communities, the library, $6.5 million, $6 million towards affordable housing. I think the governor proposed and we delivered a big increase to affordable housing funding last year. I don't think there's another big one, but $6 million is still very big. And that is coupled with very, I'll say, larger dollars that come from HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department in the federal government. And then other programs to help our communities. And then for natural resources, a lot of this is a repeat from what you've seen elsewhere. This first part here are state facilities and putting more dollars towards it. Family court in Kent and Sussex counties have been desperately in need of upgrades. There's times where, as I understand it, someone who's accused somebody else of an assault will often be sitting on the same bench outside the courtroom in one of these courthouses because there's not separate facilities for victims and those who are accused of crimes against the victims. Really just very much overdue upgrades to facilities. Delaware State Police Troop 4 building, $26 million. Helping some of our prisons, our correctional facilities, $17.7 million. And then 2 improvements to the Department of Justice facilities, the court houses in downtown Wilmington. Customs House will be used for the state Supreme Court. And what else we got here? Other big dollars. These are all state facilities. So 37 million. We've got a lot of state facilities out there. So deferred maintenance on our state buildings. The Bissell system is getting a complete workover. I saw a presentation a week or 2 ago. And that facility is, in desperate need of redesign. It was designed about 50 years ago. Very, very, very out of date. And we've got patients, clients with very different needs being sometimes in the same room because there's no separate facilities or separate wings for different situations. So it's very important we do that. State park improvements, $12 million, focusing on Killens, Lums, and Fenwick. And the Carvel office building, this is an ongoing, that building has had some serious challenges. So it's getting more dollars to I won't say finish, but keep making progress on the punch list of the problems at Carvel. So operating budget, $6 billion, grant and aid, $66 million, bond capital infrastructure, $990 million of one-time supplemental. So the governor's prepared this. DFAC estimates how much dollars there are. January, the governor proposed the budget. Joint Finance Committee will start looking at it, and the Bond Bill Committee will also, and then General Assembly will look at. Hope it's all in place by July 1st. I think that's it. Good. So I want to come into here. So the Joint Finance Committee, as I said, has public meetings, and that starts on the 30th, which I think is on Tuesday. And they'll start looking line by line through the budget. And on Tuesday, some overview in the morning, Office of Management and Budget, then Department of Human Resources, Department of Finance. On Wednesday, National Guard, Agriculture, Labor, and Transportation. And Thursday is College Day. So we've got Del Tech in the morning and DSU and UD in the afternoon, and more meetings. 4 weeks of going through all of the budget. And then another week is sort of a flex week in case it's needed, in case they find they want to go deeper into one or more of the department's budgets in there. I've prepared, and boy, is that hard to read. Let's see if we get it a little bigger. I've looked line by line on the departments and identified when dollars go up by, say, 9% or more, and I've highlighted it, or when the as a percent, or also as dollars gone up by, I think, 20 million or more, and I've highlighted that. And then I've identified what some of those aspects are. So as an example, if we pull Department of Corrections, well, the budget went up 9.9%, or about $39 million. And that's the prison's cost has gone up by 27 million of that 39. And then the community connection, so this out in the community facilities. So it may be a day center, or it may be it's not a prison, but it's a sort of halfway to release at lower level one is up 11 million. And I do this so that the members of the JFC can, when that line comes up, say, oh, Paul told me that there's a percent increase that's kind of notable, or dollar increase that's kind of notable, and let me go to the sub line within that department where that increase is. So I've done this annually for, I think, more than 10 years. So that's getting into the gory detail. That's what the Joint Finance Committee is responsible for, and they do a great job there. And the last thing I want to show here is I mentioned the one-time. So this is the dollars above that. It's for one. And one of the things is that we've got